Here we go, Greta Christina.
So, I'm here today to talk about coming out. What can the godless learn from the queers? I think we're all agreed that coming out is one of the most powerful acts that atheists can take, maybe even the most powerful political act. Since I have limited time today, I'm going to assume that we're all on board with that, right? Coming out, yay, and I'm not going to try to make that first. At the same time, we all understand that coming out can be difficult. It can have emotional consequences. It can have practical consequences. You know, JP talked about that very eloquently last night. So we need to do more than just keep telling each other, come out of the closet. We need to circulate specific, effective strategies for coming out and for supporting one another in coming out. And that's what I'm talking about today. I'm talking about the nuts and bolts of this. I'm not talking, we've been hearing all weekend about why we should come out. I'm talking about how. And specifically, I want to talk about what atheists can learn about coming out from the history of the LGBT movement. The LGBT movement learned decades ago just how important coming out was politically. When you look at opinion polls about who supports gay rights, very consistently, the #1 factor that makes people support gay rights more than anything else is whether they know a gay person. Or, more accurately, whether they know if they know a gay person. And queers figured this out decades ago, and so we've come up with very specific strategies and support systems for doing this. And atheists can learn a lot from this. At the same time, there are also some important differences between coming out atheist and coming out queer, and I actually think we can learn from those as well. So what specifically can we learn from the LGBT communities about how to come out, and importantly about how to support one another in coming out? So I think the first and most important lesson is this: there is not one right way to do this. There's not one magical coming out formula that works for everybody. So while we do need to encourage and support each other in coming out, we need to let each other do it in our own way and on our own timetable. It's also really important to remember that coming out is not a single step that we take once and are then done with. It is an ongoing process. That's true for queers, and it's true for atheists. Each time we come out to a different person, it's a different coming out moment. And also, some people we may have to come out to more than once, because they may not believe it the first time or accept it. And even after we have come out to all the really central people in our lives, coming out is still a process. It's still a series of choices that we make every day. You know, do we chat about our atheism at the basketball game and not worry about whether the people behind us can hear? You know, do we wear an atheist t-shirt to the airport? You know, do we cross in God we trust off the money? And if we do it right there in front of the store clerk? Or do we do it at home? You know, it's a series of ongoing choices. Being an out atheist is not an either-or thing. It's a continuum, and we all get to decide where we're going to be on that continuum. So again, coming out is a process, and it's not just a process for us. It's usually a process for the people that we come out to. It can take time for them to get used to it. One of the most important lessons about coming out, and again, this is something that we learned from the queer community, is patience. Do you all know that the sex advice writer Dan Savage? Awesome guy. I have my issues with him, but I mostly really like his writing. And he has a really wonderful and hopeful story about coming out. When he first told his mother that he was gay, her reaction was not good, and one of the things that she said was that she never wanted him to bring any of his boyfriends home, and she never wanted to meet any of them. Which is a really harsh thing to hear, except that years later, when Dan had been with his partner Terry for some time, Dan's mom was the one who was pressuring them to get married. She was the one who was like making them, being that typical mom saying, come on guys, get me a wedding already. She came around, it just took time. So we need to be willing to give it time, and sometimes we have to be the bigger person. When we come out as atheists, sometimes people are going to be, what's that word I'm looking for here? Total fucking assholes. But it really doesn't help if we're assholes back. It can escalate the situation, it can entrench people into a hostile position that they then later have a hard time walking back because they've committed to it. So if they get hysterical, if they're being manipulative, if they're being cruel, we need to stay calm, we need to be straightforward, and we need to maintain empathy. We need to be the bigger person. It's a really good idea to do some homework first, get familiar with the common myths and misconceptions about atheism, and be ready to counter them. But remember, your coming out conversations are not debates. Your coming out conversations with the people you care about are not about convincing some asshole on the internet that he's wrong. They're about reassuring the people who care about you that you're going to be okay. Definitely stand up for yourself, but remember that you do care about these people. Don't treat them as adversaries. Also importantly, know when to stop the conversation. If things are going south, you may need to cut it off and come back later. Again, patience, this can be a process. Very importantly, have your practical and financial ducks in a row to the greatest degree that you can before you come out. If you're a college student and your parents are supporting you, you might want to wait until you come out until you leave college before you come out to your parents. If you come out at work and it might endanger your job, make sure that you can cope with that financially. If you're living in a very religious community and coming out could isolate you, find an atheist community first and put down roots in it. Now, of course, when I talk about having your ducks in a row first, there's limits to that advice. If you wait to come out until everything is perfectly safe, you are going to wait a very long time. Coming out does mean accepting some risk. There's this kind of vicious circle that I think we're all aware of, which is that coming out won't be safe until more people come out. But the other thing, there's a flip side of that too, which is that the longer you wait to come out, the greater your chances are of being outed by somebody else, either accidentally or intentionally. And as difficult as coming out is, being outed by somebody else sucks a lot worse. And staying in the closet involves another kind of risk. It involves the risk and the stress of living a lie. That is not easy. That is a hard way to live. So when you're doing your cost-benefit analysis about coming out and who to come out to, remember, neither choice is risk-free. Coming out is a risk, staying in is also a risk. Very importantly, speaking of having your ducks in a row, if you're coming out at work, get familiar with non-discrimination laws first. If you do get discriminated against, document it. Actually, it's a really good idea to document your work situation before you come out. If you're getting positive work reviews, find a way to document it so that if you've been getting great reviews from your boss, and then all of a sudden, miraculously, after you come out as an atheist, you start getting hassled or fired, you have a better case for job discrimination. And if you possibly can, find an atheist community first. Even if you don't live in a very religious community, coming out can be stressful. It can be alienating. Sometimes surprisingly so. I live in San Francisco. You would think that it would really just not be that big a deal, and I was really surprised at how many friends I lost when I came out as an atheist. And having an atheist community really makes this a lot easier. Okay, so all these ideas I'm talking about, these are drawn from years and decades of LGBT experiences. But there's also some real differences between coming out atheist and coming out queer. I think we can learn from those as well. And there's one difference that I think is especially important. When you come out as queer, you're not telling straight people that they're wrong to be straight. But there is no way to come out as an atheist without telling people, if you believe in God, you're wrong. That's the implication. There's no way to avoid that. And I think we need to accept this. I think we need to accept that relations between atheists and believers may always be a little bit strained and a little bit difficult in a way that isn't necessarily true with LGBT people. So if you're looking for a way to come out as atheist that's going to make it perfectly okay with the people in your life, again, you have a long way ahead of you. The people you come out to will probably get better about it with time, but unless they become atheists, they may always have something of a hard time with that. And I think that is more true for atheists than it is for LGBT people. And that actually brings me to another really important point. When you're coming out, especially when you're first coming out, focus on countering myths and misinformation about atheists. Do not get sucked into arguments about whether God is real. This may sound surprising to some of you because I love those arguments. I'm entirely in favor of getting into arguments with people about whether God exists. The coming out conversation is not the time for it. And here's why. Coming out isn't just about them accepting you. They need to know that you're going to accept them. And for a lot of people, the religion isn't just an idea, it's an identity. And when you come out as atheist, it can seem like you were rejecting that identity, like you were rejecting them. Again, I don't know if there's any real way around this, but you don't need to exacerbate it by saying, I'm an atheist and here's 20 reasons why your God doesn't exist. Have that conversation later. There's some other important differences between coming out as atheist and coming out queer, but I have limited time here, so I'm going to skip those and move on. If I'm doing a workshop later on, if you want to talk about it later, we can do that. So I've mostly been talking to you today about the difficulties of coming out. But there's a really important flip side of that we need to remember, that sometimes coming out is not as traumatic as we fear. You know, I cannot tell you the number of people that I've talked to, and again, this includes queers and it includes atheists, who've told me their coming out stories. We all love to tell each other our coming out stories, and those stories have ended with, it wasn't really that bad. You know, or, yeah, it was kind of sucked at first, but they got over it. They got over it faster than I thought they would, and now it's pretty much okay. And very importantly, sometimes when we come out, the reaction is, me too. I have heard so many stories from atheists who have told me that they've come out to their friends and family, and the reaction has been this delighted relief. They don't believe in God either, and they've been scared to tell us. Okay, so I'm going to shift gears here for a second. I've mostly been talking so far about how we ourselves can come out, and I now want to ask a different question. How can we support and encourage each other in coming out? How do we create a culture where coming out as atheist is more natural? And how do we make atheism a safer place to come out into? So I think the main thing to remember here is that coming out is easier for some people than for others. You know, some of us are privileged, you know, to live in circumstances where coming out is relatively easy and untraumatic, and some of us not so much. It can be harder to come out if you're younger and you're financially dependent on your parents. It can be harder if you live in a place where religion is really deeply ingrained in the social and economic structure. It can be harder if you're already part of a marginalized group. You know, if you're gay, if you're an immigrant, if you're a person of color, and you don't need another stigma piled onto the ones that you've already got. It can be harder if the place you live doesn't have a strong atheist community. So it's harder for some people than for others. And so when we encourage each other to come out, which I think we should do, we really need to make sure that encouragement doesn't turn into judgment, that it doesn't turn into pressure, that it doesn't turn into guilt tripping. And again, this is something we learn from experience with LGBT communities. I think that we can be encouraging and supportive about coming out and still acknowledge that it's difficult. You know, we can have our messaging, instead of our messaging being just come out, come out, come out, we can have our message be come out if you can. You know, come out if it's safe. And very importantly, understanding that coming out is a continuum rather than this either or thing, that can also help us encourage each other to come out in a way that's compassionate. You know, again, instead of just saying come out, come out, come out, we can say things like come out as much as you can. You know, take one step out. You know, take one step outside your comfort zone. You know, come out to one person. Start with there. You know, and then somebody else. Obviously, another really obvious way that we can encourage other atheists to come out is to be a role model and to be more out ourselves. This is actually one of the best things about coming out. Again, this is something we learned from the queer community. Coming out has a snowball effect. When we come out, other people feel safer coming out. And then they make other people feel safer coming out. And so on, and so on, and so on. This has a snowball effect. we should definitely keep working on visibility. Billboards, bus ads, letters to the editor, t-shirts, Facebook, Twitter, organizations and individuals. We are doing an awesome job with visibility. We need to keep that up. It is hugely important to get people familiar with basic facts about us. That makes coming out more smoothly. And it also helps atheists find each other. And that actually brings me to forming communities. Absolutely one of the most important things we can do to help other people come out, to support each other. The reasons, I think we're all familiar with this research, the reasons that people stay in the religion that they're in, they have very little to do with the theology. They have very little to do with the religion. It has to do with communities and the things that religious communities provide. So we need to keep working to create atheist communities that provide the things that religions provide. Safety nets and counseling, rites of passage, family activities, avenues for charitable work and social justice work, events and companionship and continuity. A couple of specific notes on community building. I've been giving talks to a lot of different atheist groups around the country. I've been talking with people about how the group works. And one of the things I've found is that the groups that tend to be strongest tend to be the ones with the widest range of activities. If your group only does socializing, or you only have speakers that give talks, you only do visibility and activism, you're only going to be attractive to a small portion of atheists who might otherwise be interested in your group. When you diversify your activities, your group becomes a safe place to land for more people. I would also really love to see us build more bridges between student groups and local groups. The student atheist movement, in case anybody hasn't noticed, in case y'all have been under a rock for the last 2 years and haven't noticed this, the student atheist movement is huge. They're very well organized, they're very highly motivated, they are growing by leaps and bounds, and they're doing a lot to create visibility and community, and they're doing it for a demographic that's very open to our message, which is to say, students. But there is this problem, which is that students often don't stick with the atheist movement when they leave school. And what I've found in talking with people is that the students who tend to stick with atheism after they leave school tend to be the ones that are already in the habit of working with their local groups when they were student organizers. The reverse of that is also true. Local groups with a more diverse age range tend to be the ones that have been working with the student groups to co-sponsor events and help each other out with publicity and promotion and so on. They show up at each other's events and so on. That's really important. If you want some more specific ideas about how to build those bridges, talk to the Secular Student Alliance or CFI. They can give you some real nuts and bolts on how to do that. And speaking of diversity, we were speaking of diversity, weren't we? Well, we are now. Okay, I have a huge amount to say about diversity in our community, racial diversity, gender diversity, class diversity, and so on. I actually gave an entire talk about diversity in the atheist community. I don't have time to do that today. I don't have time to do this topic justice. So just a couple of really small points I want to say about diversity. One is that a lack of diversity in a community is a self-perpetuating cycle. We all have unconscious biases and assumptions that keep these self-perpetuating cycles going. So we have to take conscious action to intervene in them. To give just one example, if African Americans are having a harder time coming out as atheists than white people, we can't just say, oh, that's because black people are special. They have these special black people problems. And we can't treat black people as other and white people as the default. We have to say, okay, what is it that's making it harder for black people to come out as atheists, and what can we do about that? We can't just keep saying, this should be a one-size-fits-all movement, and that size should be the size it already is, a size that comfortably fits the people who are already here. We need to be willing to do things differently from the way that we're comfortable with. And the other really important point I want to make about diversity is that people notice. Y'all were at the Reason Rally the other day, right? Probably a lot of you noticed how diverse that was. It wasn't quite as diverse as it could be, but we had a huge range of ages, we had a huge range of genders, we had a huge range of different races, and people noticed. I've been following some of the news coverage, and people notice. This works. The work that we've been doing, that a lot of us have been doing, trying to make the atheist community more diverse, it's working, it's paying off, let's keep doing it. So I could gas on all day about diversity, but again, we have a time limit here, so I'm going to move on. And I want to talk about one more hugely important thing that we can do to support each other in coming out. And that's that we can tell happy stories about coming out. You know, when we talk about coming out, it's really easy to focus on how difficult it is. It's really easy to tell the sad stories about, you know, people who get kicked out by their families and all that, and that's true, and we shouldn't ignore that. But that's really only one side of it. You know, for a lot of people, coming out as atheists is fun. You know, for a lot of us, it's really exciting. You know, telling somebody something about yourself that they don't know, and you don't know how they're going to react to it. I mean, that's scary, but it's also an adventure. You know, it's exciting, it's fun. Coming out is fun, and being out is fun. There's actually some research I saw recently that backs this up. There was this researcher who was studying atheists who have come out of the closet. And what they found was that, you know, on the whole, not universally, but on the whole, atheists who have come out are happier, even if they do, in fact, alienate the people they're close to. Even if their worst fears are realized, and they lose their family, and they lose their friends, and they have to start from scratch, they're still happier. Yes, absolutely. Coming out can be upsetting, coming out can be dangerous, it can be a real pain in the neck, but it can also be awesome. You know, we are happier when we live a life with more integrity. We're happier when we live a life with less fear. You know, we're happier when the people who love us really love us. And they're not loving some other person who's walking around with our face and our name. Yes, coming out can be hard, but can also be the door to a much better life. It usually is the door to a better life. Look around you. Are we all happier now that we're... Those of us who are out, are we happier now that we're out? If we want to support each other in coming out, we can create all these wonderful structures, we can, you know, circulate all these wonderful strategies, but one of the best things we can do is to get that message out. Thank you.